Okay, so today's lecture is going to be about outlining your speech. This is how you take the information you've collected from whatever sources you have, including what you've written, and then putting it in a way that's being able to be organized. So there's two different types of outlines you're going to have. One is a preparation outline. That's complete sentences. It's the whole Megillah, you know, everything that you found, everything you're going to write. I'll explain more in a bit. We'll talk about what should your outline have, all the different things that should be included in that. Some guidelines on what you need to have. The visual framework. This is important for just making sure that everything looks accordingly. And I'll give you an example. We'll have an activity where we talk about chocolate, where you're going to practice outlining, because I'm going to give you a bunch of random stuff on this side of the screen here, and you're going to put it in the right order on this side of the screen here. The bibliography, all you need to do, that's your works cited, you know, just where did you get your sources, everything else. You have citation machine, so it kind of takes the guesswork out of that. The speaking outline, this is what differs from the preparation outline. It's just going to be like not fully complete sentences. It's going to be keywords that get you to remember what your talking points are. And a follow-up activity where we take the activity on chocolate, where that's going to be the preparation outline, and tweak it to a speaking outline. So then we'll talk about delivery cues, just some things you can put on your note cards like slow down, eye contact, things of that nature. And then talk about next class on Tuesday. So just when you're preparing your speech, it's just a detailed outline. Complete sentences are a must. You don't want to make sure that you're just sort of dropping off out of nowhere. This is what it should have. And this is everything that was pretty much included on your blank outline. The title, your specific purpose, the central idea of your speech, the introduction, your main points, subpoints, connectives, those things where you can do internal summaries, internal previews, your conclusion, and then the bibliography. You don't need that for your personal narrative speech, obviously, because you don't have to cite any sources. But before you ever turn in your outline, you should make sure you have all this stuff. And I know what I said in my last lecture, like you don't really need to have a title, but just think, you know, what is my speech going to be about? You just put something there. Some guidelines. You got to have a specific purpose, because if you don't, you're going to get distracted. And what am I really talking about? What is my audience expecting to hear? What's the central idea of your speech? It's got to be like, in this speech, I'm going to tell you about this, but that's broken down into your main points. Your intro, body, and conclusion should be labeled. I shouldn't have any. And it should be in order. Obviously, your intro comes first. The consistent pattern and symbolization and indentation. It just means that when you have Roman numerals for your main points, that it's the same Roman numeral below, that it's a capital I, and then your second main point would be the two I's, the II. State your main points in full sentences. All right, when you put this on your speaking outline, it doesn't have to be full sentences, but you want to make sure that in your preparation outline, you do have full sentences. You should label your transitions, and you could just keep that word connective in there and then just put whatever your connective is. If it's a signpost or a transition or whatever. And then just make sure you have your bibliography, because I need to know where information came from. Otherwise, your whole entire speech is potentially plagiarized, because I don't know what information came from where. You have to indicate somehow what you're going to say and where it came from. Any questions on any guidelines? All right. And then provide a title. Visual framework. Like I said, just make sure, like, here's your main point number one. You wouldn't put main point colon, and then whatever your main point is, you would just one, and then whatever that main point is. And then do you see how it goes from this to A, your subpoint? And then if you wanted to have the next subpoint, it would be B. You wouldn't put C, you wouldn't put a lowercase c or a lowercase b for that matter. Then you have to make sure that you change it up again when you go down further. You go from the Roman numeral to a capital letter to the number one. It doesn't have to be precisely this, like that can be a lowercase a if you wanted to. Just make sure it matches that in your next subpoint. If this was a lowercase a, that would have to be a lowercase b, you know, or 1, 2, whatever. I'm not going to be a stickler. I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, your subpoints have to start with numbers, because we all have a different way of wanting to do things. And I don't want you to waste time thinking, oh, what should the order look like, when, as long as it makes sense to you, that's all that really matters. Then when you go on to your next main point, boom, back to Roman numeral number 2, whatever subpoints you might have. So next, your bibliography, just a list of your sources. You can use APA or MLA. I'm pretty sure a lot of you are pretty familiar with MLA format. So when I was in Intro to Public Speaking, he made us do APA format. I'm not going to make you do anything like that. It's just whatever you're comfortable with. But I will say this, if you're going to use MLA format, use it for every source. Don't go from APA to MLA, switching it up, okay? And then citation machine. This is your best friend, because it really just takes the guesswork out of creating citations. So you create your citation, and then you can pick whatever source it is. Is it a newspaper, a Bible verse? Is it a chapter out of a book? Go ahead and pick website. And then another thing I will tell you is that they started putting advertisements on here. That matters because you have to watch like a 30-second advertisement before you can do like 10 sources on your bibliography. So if it's 11:59 and you're crunching to get it done, that is a factor that I'm going to let you know. So you can also create it manually, where you put the article title, the first name of the author, the last name, the website title, the URL, when it was electronically published, and when you accessed it. This does matter, because if it was from 2002 and you're now accessing it in the year 2024, a lot of stuff can change in 22 years, right? So try to find the most recent information available, if possible. Because if you're citing the original material, that's not really going to be the case. But page 201 of your book, it gives a bibliography, and it's in alphabetical order, and that is important. Yeah, I'll pull that up at the end, so I can just continue on with what we're talking about here. But the speaking outline is different, because if you just bring your whole preparation outline up here, you're going to want to read it, and it's going to be very jarring, because you're just going to be looking down, looking up, looking down, looking up. So you're going to use the same visual framework. So it's just basically a summarization of what you have. And it's got to be legible, because if you're up here and you're squinting at it, it's just taking away from the time you would be using to deliver your speech. And keep those keywords brief. And sometimes you might need delivery cues. So I'll give you some examples. Directions for delivering key parts of the speech. So this is on page 205 and 206. It might be things like eye contact, slow down, pause, and reference your visual aid. Like if you have a visual aid, you would put bring up visual aid, reference visual aid, what have you. So as you can see, this is from Catherine Harmon Courage. It goes last name, first name, middle name. This is the name of the article, Prairies of the Sea. Where did the article come from? The Smithsonian. December 2020 is when it was published. Here's the link to the article, and here's the date that it was accessed. Usually when you put all this information in a citation machine, it can find the information for you, but you might have to put in some stuff manually. So if you look in the actual outline here, they say things like, one such scientist is Robert Orth of the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. The stuff below that is the stuff that he said. As reported in the Smithsonian, they've been seeding areas where seagrass once dominated. We now have 13 square miles of this and carbon sequestration. So it's sort of implied where that information came from there, whereas down here, the more seagrass we can plant, the better we can combat climate change. So you don't need to cite information that's known fact, like it's common knowledge, you know? But something like this, we now have 13 square acres of this. I know where that information came from because it was just proceeding right here. Above that, it says The Guardian, which is a newspaper, reports that seagrass can sequester carbon 35 times faster than rainforest. It accounts for 18% of the ocean's carbon sequestration. So again, it's obvious where that information comes from. But as per, and here's another example on how you want to make sure that you're doing the proper amount of indentation and what have you, because all this stuff is the proper amount of 1, A, B, whatever, but it's got to be staggered in a way that makes sense. This just doesn't visually look as good as the one on the right. Then we have this activity. So the first main point of this speech is chocolate has a long and fascinating history, okay? And then over on the right side, we have all of the subpoints. We're going to try to find an order that makes sense, because the next step is there are 4 basic steps for turning cocoa beans into chocolate, okay? So the people that are at your table, you're going to try to figure out, and this is on page 122 of your textbook, try to figure out what order these should go in, and then we'll figure out together as a class the proper order that these should be going in, okay? One thing I will relay to you is these words right here: fourth, second, third. Where did first go? First, all right? So the second is going to be a little more obvious in terms of, what order those should be going in, because there's only 4 subpoints down here. That's my hint to you. So as a group, try to figure out what are these 3 main subpoints, and then what is the supporting evidence for those subpoints. All right, you're on your own. I'll give you like 10 minutes. So, like I was saying, the second subpoint's a little bit more obvious. You wouldn't start with the 4th thing, So as you can see, there are 4 basic steps. Number 1 is the seeds are dried and fermented to become what are called cocoa beans. Second, they're roasted, shelled, and cracked into small pieces. They're ground to produce a rich brown liquid called liquor. And then this liquor's used to be making all genuine chocolate products. So that's pretty obvious because you can see those words right there. The thing that's not obvious is the long and fascinating history. What do you think is the proper order to arrange these points? Because we talked about that when we talked about the organization. It can be topical, it can be chronological, it can be any of those things. So what do we think? And I'll read, in case you can't see some of these, I'll read them for you. So this one: the new heated and sweetened beverage soon became the rage of Europe. So another one is, in the 1500s, Spaniards introduced chocolate to Europe after returning from Central America. Okay, so it probably, if it became the rage of Europe, that might be a subpoint, right? Because if it's the rage of Europe, who brought it to Europe? So another one: the Maya used seeds of the cacao tree to brew a cold, bitter drink. Chocolate was first used in Central America by the Maya and then by the Aztecs. Those should be key words for you: the Maya and the Aztecs. In the 1800s, chocolate became a popular candy as well as a beverage, so my attendance question had some bearing for today. In Europe, Spaniards changed the beverage by heating it and adding sugar. So again, you see the word in Europe, that should be the connection to this, because you see Europe right here. The Aztecs brewed a similar drink called chocotl. So what do we think would be the first point right here, chronologically speaking?
Either the first or second one you said.
First or second one? So the new heated sweetened beverage, that one? Or this one? Okay. Well, before it came to Europe, who came up with it? Or the Maya and the Aztecs, right? So chronologically speaking, you could say first it was here, and then it came to here, right? Well, if you're talking about history, chronologically, it would make sense, right? You would start in the beginning and then go on. So the first thing you could do is say, the Maya used the seeds to brew a cold, bitter drink. But I think, you see this word here, first? It was first used by the Maya and then the Aztecs. So I would say, I'll go ahead and label these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you could say it was first used in Central America by the Maya and the Aztecs, number 6. And then the subpoint of that would be because it was first used by the Maya and the Aztecs, this is where you could, this is really up to you. Because it was said in order, it was used by the Maya and then the Aztecs, it would make sense that you would first bring up how the Mayans used it and then how the Aztecs used it, right? So Maya used this, the Aztecs used this. So I'm just going to go ahead and say 5 and then 10. Because it was first used in Central America by these two groups. Here are the two groups, right? Then we get into it a little further. So I'm going to cross these out just so that I'm not getting confused. 10. So we know that after the Mayans came up with it, it got transitioned into Europe. So we have to try to find the main point that works in the most befitting way. So the new heated and sweetened beverage soon became the rage of Europe. In the 1500s, they introduced this to Europe after returning from Central America. And they changed the beverage by heating it and adding sugar. There's 3 points right here. And there should be a proper order in which this is done. Anybody want to give me a guess as to what this main subpoint should be? Would it be number 2, number 3, or number 9? Don't worry about your ego. It's okay to be wrong. Because you can think of it as being a little bit more broad and then getting more specific. So what do you think is the most broad statement there? Yep. The new heated and sweetened beverage soon became the rage of Europe. In the 1500s, Spaniards introduced chocolate to Europe after returning from Central America. In Europe, Spaniards changed the beverage by heating and adding sugar.
Say 3. I would say
3.
I would say 3 and 9 together.
3, then 2, then 9. Okay.
Because it's explaining more to the drink, like how they added it and how they found how it was added. There were more, it talks about how they like heated it and sweetened it, and also accent down on the nine how they added sugar to it.
Right.
It's more describing.
Right. So I would say it would be number 2 first. It became the rage of Europe, and then we describe how it became the rage of Europe. So it just starts in a very broad way and then gets more specific. So the heated beverage became the rage of Europe because in the 1500s, they introduced it to Europe after returning from Central America. And then the final thing would be, how did it become popularized? And that would be, they changed it by heating it and adding sugar. Does that make sense? So we start by getting broad. It came to Europe, you know? Because that's a broad statement. It became very popular. How did it become popular is the follow-up question. It became popular because it was introduced by the Spaniards, whom changed the recipe by adding sugar to it. And then there's one final thing that you could say in this top subpoint, and I think there's only a couple more left anyway. Okay, so we start by the Mayans and the Aztecs, and then we go by talking into the 1500s. And then there's one more point here. In the 1800s, it became a popular candy as well as a beverage. So that would be number 7. 3 and 9 are kind of interchangeable. So I don't want you to think that's the exact order it has to go in, because you can say they changed it by adding sugar and then saying in the 1500s they introduced it to Europe after returning from Central America. But I would argue that you would start broad and then get a little bit more specific here. So, and then down here, the 4 basic steps, you would just go in order. You would say first, second, third, fourth. Okay? So now we're going to think about how would we turn this into a speaking outline instead of a preparation one. So there's some keywords we can sort of think of, or what have you. But how you synopsize this information is up to you, because you just have to find some words that work for you that get you to remember what it is. So chocolate was first used in Central America by the Maya and the Aztecs. Something you could put would be Maya, Aztecs. Just how can you remember, how can you jog your memory to remember that information? That's something you can put on your little notepad to get you to remember. And then the next thing would be, so we already knew that it was first used by this. And then we go into, how did the Maya use it? How did the Aztecs use it? So you can say Maya, cold bitter. Right? And then you would move on to the Aztecs, and you could just put Chacatl. Just one little keyword that gets you to know, what am I supposed to be saying here? Next, we move on. It became the Rage of Europe. You could just put Rage of Europe. Or you don't even have to take it and use the exact same wording you use. You could even say something like popular in Europe. Bless you. And then after you say it became popular in Europe, you would say the Spaniards changed it by heating it and adding sugar. And then the Spaniards introduced chocolate to Europe after returning from Central America. So it became popular in Europe because Spaniards returned. And you could even put from, bless you, Central America. It could be just Spaniards return. It could just be Spaniards return from Central America. Then you'd say added sugar. Right? And then the subpoint number C here, you could put something like 1800. Oh boy. I'm so bad at making eights. I don't know why. 1800 sugar. Oh wait, no, I already said that. 1800s candy beverage. Bevy. Okay. And then down here, there are 4 basic steps. First, cacao seeds are dried and fermented to become what is called cocoa beans. So you can say, and because you already have an A here, you don't need to put first and then whatever. It would make sense for you to go in order. Or you could say first is seeds. Oh my goodness. You could say seeds dried, right? And then you move on to the second, roasted, shelled, and cracked. You could put an acronym, roasted, shelled, cracked, into nibs. And the third thing, they're ground to produce a rich brown liquid called chocolate liquor. Third, liquor, you could say, or just liquid. And then the final thing here, this product is used in making all genuine chocolate products. So fourth, all products. So these are just examples. What is most important is that you find something that works for you, whatever that is. All right, whatever you need to write, whatever you need to say, as long as it is coherent to you. Are there any questions about outlining here? Okay. So, does anybody need to, I know this is all chicken scratch, but last chance to take a picture. Okay. So, I thought that would be an appropriate exercise just so you knew what's the right order or what's an order that sort of makes sense. And if it doesn't have to be in that order because that order doesn't make sense to me, I want to find something that makes sense to me. So it's entirely up to you, as long as it works for you. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull up Citation Machine so I can show you what it would look like to take a source and turn it into a citation. All right. Somebody throw out a topic for me. Anything.
Like,
Nike? Okay, just do it. Nike. So there's a lot of different articles here, you know, like different types of shoes. $5 million worth of stolen products recovered from a California warehouse. Here's how I would create a citation for this. I would take the website, copy it, and then paste it right here. Boom. It tries to find the source. Look at that, it found it. You click on cite, and it says what you found, what it found on its own, and what it didn't find, the publisher or the sponsor. So we can see the name of the article, the URL it came from, the website title is East Bay Times. The date it was accessed, the date it was published. We go to continue. It gives us the author's first and last name. We could, if we wanted to, look right here, Mona Darwish. So we could input all this information manually if we wanted to, but it's already right here, Mona Darwish. It's from the East Bay Times. And as you can see, it missed the publisher or sponsor here. When it said it missed the publisher or sponsor, but it didn't. So in that case, it's the same. And then we say, and also it says that it was published on the same day we accessed it. I don't think that's true. It says it was updated February 1st at whatever, and it was first published on this day. But because I just Googled this, it's a pretty recent article. So in that case, there wouldn't have to be a discrepancy there. So complete citation, and bam, right there, boom. What I would recommend to you is don't bother copying and pasting it yet, all right? And you might be thinking, that looks a little bit different because it's in APA format, right? So how is that any different? Well, the first thing is it starts with Darwish M, and then it gives us the date of that information. If I wanted to change it, all I do is click on this, and I click MLA number 9, and it changes it automatically, all right? Darwish Mona, the name of the article, East Bay Times, when it was published, and then the link to the article there. You can totally include a hyperlink if you wanted to. But what my suggestion to you would be complete your works cited in this and then copy it over into your paper because it will automatically alphabetize itself and you don't have to worry about indentation. It should be that it just copies and pastes right over. So you can say copy all. And then you could even check it for plagiarism if you wanted to, but go back to citations. So. And this doesn't really have a lot of bearing right now because you don't have to cite any sources, but I wanted to make you all aware of it. Any questions about Citation Machine? I'm sure you've all used it before. All right. We don't have a lecture next class on Tuesday. We're going to be doing impromptu speaking exercises, and I will pull up the PowerPoint that explains what that is. Here for you briefly, but all I would recommend you do before then, read chapter 11, do the homework if you haven't already. But go. Now, how this is going to work is it's just a 30-minute to 1 minute exercise, 30-second to 1 minute exercise, teaches you how to improvise, organize your thoughts, helps you warm up to the idea of getting speeches. You would never improvise when giving your speech, but this, I think, is some good practice. You're going to be given a question that's randomly assigned, and then you're going to try to come up with an answer and some required reasoning for it. Here's an example. What animal would you be? What is 3 reasons why? I would be a penguin because, I don't know, I want to be fluffy, I want to waddle, and I like the cold. There's 3 examples right there. But that's a good way to think about when you make your speech, because think of it as like, here's my topic, here's my 3 main points. You know, other examples are the ideal pet is 3 things. What are those 3 things? Small, hairless, quiet. Just thinking of something. Who's the most successful person you know? What's your favorite season? What are 3 things that scare you? If you were dean, what's 3 things you would do for this university? 3 things you would do during summer quarantine. Wish you would have done. I know it's a long time ago. If you could live anywhere, where would it be? Eating only one food, what would it be? If you meet anybody, who would it be? 3 biggest concerns for the future. What do you want to do when you get out of college? Or 3 things. 3 favorite things to do when, what were 3 of your favorite things to do when growing up? And then question 14, what's the best movie, musician, video game, sport? And then you can give 3 reasons for that. So 14 is kind of a mixed bag. And it could be that I just assign this question to everybody, and then you have a more individualized question. But that's what we're going to be doing for the next 2 days next week. And I might, if you don't want to do impromptu speaking on both those days, we can have one day be a prep day, and then the following week will also be a prep day. Because if we pull up our schedule here, it'll show up. There it is. Where are we? We are right here, February 1st. Here's our 2 impromptu speaking days next week. We have 1 prep day the following week. Let me scroll down. But what I'm saying is, if you only want to do this for 1 day, we can have a preparation day here and here. All right? It's entirely up to you. We'll see how it goes on Tuesday. Any questions? Where we're at, where we're going? All righty. We are all done then.